Alright guys, I am back again with another deck profile for Cardfight Vanguard Dear Days 2 on Nintendo Switch. So this time we got version 1 of my vintage format Oracle Think Tank Tsukuyomi deck. So version 1 is only including cards from the base game, no DLC cards are included. So that'll be everything up through Booster Set 5. And this deck is actually one of my favorite vintage format decks that's available in this game, right now anyway. And it is a very fun deck, very cool deck that lets you build up your soul, lets you draw a bunch of cards, and potentially can let you actually stack your entire deck so you know exactly what cards are coming and when. So a very, very cool concept and just a very fun deck to play overall. So, as always, we'll be going through the deck, and then we'll show it off in one card fight. So, starting first with the grade zeros, first off we do have our starting Vanguard, which is Godhawk Ichibyoshi. So he's got an auto ability that says at the beginning of your ride phase, you look at 5 cards from the top of your deck. Search for up to 1 card named Goddess of the Crescent Moon Tsukuyomi from among them. Ride it, put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. And if you rode, you cannot normal ride during that ride phase. So this card is the first piece of the ride chain for this deck. You do want to start on this card, of course, and then ride up through each of the 3 different forms of Tsukuyomi in order to reach your main boss. So this ability lets you check the top 5 of your deck to search for the grade 1 form of Tsukuyomi, Goddess of the Crescent Moon, and potentially ride it directly from your deck. So, in which case you basically get a free ride that turn. Obviously there's the RNG factor since you may or may not find that card in the top 5. However, there's another benefit to this skill, since regardless of whether you find Goddess of the Crescent Moon or not, you're sending 4 to 5 cards from the top of your deck to the bottom of the deck in any order you want. And the grade 1 and grade 2 forms of Tsukuyomi have very similar abilities to this, searching for the next form up. So potentially, if you can get your entire ride chain off, you can send up to 15 cards to the bottom of your deck in any order you wish. Which means that you will know the exact bottom 15 cards in your deck. Which doesn't sound all that important, but this deck has an absolutely massive amount of draw power, which means that you can potentially actually reach those 15 cards on the bottom of your deck without too much trouble. So if you can get the ride chain off consistently and get those cards stacked and actually reach the stack through drawing down into them, once you reach that stack you will know exactly what cards you will have coming and when. Which means you can know a Miracle Heal is coming to potentially let an attack through that you normally wouldn't be able to guard, and just get a heal trigger that you know is coming. If your opponent guards for 2 to pass and you know that you're going to get 2 triggers on your next drive check, then you can safely give that first trigger to your Vanguard, knowing for sure that it will go through. So there's obviously a ton of advantage to come from that. Now it does require a lot of setup, and it does require you looking into, not missing any pieces of your ride chain. So it's not a make or break kind of thing for this deck. Like if you don't manage to pull off the whole stack, it's not like your entire strategy falls apart or anything. But if you can manage to pull that off, it does give you a huge advantage. Which, it can potentially be difficult to remember 15 cards in their exact order on the bottom of your deck. Unless you're like Misaki in the anime, who use this deck and have a photographic memory. But if you don't, you can always just, have a note to the side and just write down the order of cards on the bottom of your deck, which I believe was illegal back in the day if you were playing this deck in an actual physical tournament. But this is a video game and there's no one there to stop you, so you can't always just take notes to keep track of that. It makes things a lot easier. But yeah, very important skill for this deck. And of course, if you do fail to find Goddess of the Crescent Moon in those top 5, if you have a copy of it in your hand, you can just go ahead and normal ride it from your hand as normal, and potentially still keep that ride chain intact. If you don't have it in your hand, of course, you still do have to normal ride some grade 1 from your hand if you don't want to misride for the turn. So very important starter for this deck, absolutely mandatory in order to get your ride chain off. And some very, very cool artwork as well. So the only other grade zeros we have in the deck is our trigger lineup. So we have 8 crit, 4 draw, and 4 heal. So starting first with the crit triggers, we have 4 copies of Psychic Bird, who has an activate ability when he's on rear guard circle. This is that you can put this unit into your soul for the cost. And the effect is, if you have an Oracle Think Tank Vanguard, you draw up to 1 card. So this is a pretty simple skill. You just shove him into soul in order to draw a new card to replace himself. So it's a ±0. That doesn't sound too good on paper because you're giving up a 10k shield for a mystery card off the top of your deck. But it helps in 2 ways. One, it's another draw ability, so that can potentially help you reach your stack faster. And the other big thing is the grade 3 Tsukuyomi requires you to have 6 cards in your soul in order to take full advantage of her ability. So if you get your ride chain off, you should have 5 once you hit turn 3. So this card can be the 6th card you need into your soul in order to meet that requirement. So it's just a simple, easy way to get that extra soul you need without costing you any card advantage or relying on an attack hitting or anything like that. So overall, just a helpful card for the deck. So additionally, for the other crit trigger, we have 4 copies of Oracle Guardian Nike. So just your vanilla crit. Next, for the draws, we have 4 copies of Dream Eater. Again, just a vanilla draw. And then lastly, for the heals, we have 4 copies of Lozenge Magus. So she has 2 auto abilities. First one says, when another Oracle Think Tank rides this unit, you may call this card to rearguard circle. So this ability is never used in this deck. It's a Forerunner ability, which means you can potentially use this card for a starter if you wanted to. But obviously in this deck, we really need Ichiboshi. So you're not using this card for a starter, so it never gets ridden, so this ability isn't used. And then she has her second auto ability when she's on rearguard circle. That says, when this unit boosts, the boosted unit gets power plus 3,000 until end of that battle. And at the beginning of the end phase of that turn, you return this unit to your deck and shuffle your deck. So it turns her into a 6k booster for 1 turn, and then returns her to the deck and shuffles her back in. Which it's a way to cycle heals back into your deck, but again, this ability mostly isn't used in this deck, mostly because the shuffle will fuck up your stack if you're going for that strategy. So if you're trying to do that, obviously you can't use this skill. If you missed your ride chain, or you had to ride into Amaterasu, which is the backup Vanguard for this deck, so if you just foregone the stack strategy entirely, you can potentially use this just to get a heal back into your deck. But 99% of the time, you're not going to be calling this card and using the skill at all. You're just going to be keeping it in your hand for the shield value. So that is all of the grade 0s. Moving on to the grade 1s. First off, we have 4 copies of Goddess of the Crescent Moon, Tsukuyomi. So she has her auto ability that says, at the beginning of your ride phase, you look at 5 cards from the top of your deck. Search for up to 1 card named Goddess of the Half Moon Tsukuyomi from among them. Ride it, put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order, and if you rode, you cannot normal ride during that ride phase. So again, very similar skill to Ichiboshi's, just searching out the grade 2 Tsukuyomi instead of the grade 1. So pretty much all the same benefits I've already went through, helping get that ride chain more consistently, potentially free ride. If you miss it in the top 5, then of course you can just ride from hand normally again. And it's more cards into your stack. So obviously a very vital card for the deck. You definitely want to run max copies of this to give yourself the best chances of finding them in the top 5 checks. Which, another thing to note about this card and all of the forms of Tsukuyomi, actually, their artwork is actually done by Hiroyuki Takei, which is the creator of Shaman King, which is another series I'm a big fan of. So another very cool thing about this deck. So next up, we have 4 copies of Oracle Guardian Gemini. So this is just your vanilla 8k grade 1. Nothing special here, just helping you hit those magic numbers easily, especially comboing with Silent Tom, which is one of the grade 2s we'll go through here in a moment. So next we got 2 copies of Weather Girl Milk. So she has her auto ability that says when this unit boosts an Oracle Think Tank Vanguard, if the number of cards in your hand is 4 or greater, the boosted unit gets power plus 4,000 until end of that battle. So this card is just your Vanguard booster. If you have at least 4 cards in your hand, then she's a 10k booster for your Vanguard. So if you can get this behind the grade 3 Tsukuyomi, she is a 11k, so that'll make her roll of 21k, which is of course a magic number against 11k Vanguards. Behind Amaterasu can potentially be a roll of 24 as well, which is even better. So very simple skill. This deck draws a ton, so most of the time you should be able to meet those requirements pretty easily. One thing to note that this is a auto on boost ability, so it checks your hand count as soon as you declare the attack and the boost. So that means even if your drive checks from your Vanguard would push you past the 4 that you need, you still will not get the boost in that situation. You'll just get the 6k from our base power. So do keep that in mind. But overall, yeah, just an easy 10k booster for your Vanguard. So very, very nice. So then lastly for the grade 1s, we just have our Sentinels. So 4 copies of Battle Sister Chocolat. So, of course, she has the standard Perfect Guard auto ability. Choose an Oracle Think Tank from your hand and discard it. When this unit is placed on Guardian Circle, you may pay the cost. If you do, choose one of your Oracle Think Tank that is being attacked, and that unit cannot be hit until end of that battle. So, can block any attack. No option to be free, of course, like the standard formats Perfect Guards. But obviously a vital card for the deck. So that is all of the grade 1s. Moving on to the grade 2s. First off, we have 4 copies of Goddess of the Half Moon Tsukuyomi. So this one actually has 2 auto abilities. First one says when this unit is placed on Vanguard Circle, if you have a card named Goddess of the Crescent Moon Tsukuyomi and a card named Godhawk Ichibyoshi in your soul, you may soul charge 2. So if you manage to get each piece of your ride chain up until this point, at least, you just get a free soul charge 2 off of that, which again is very, very important for you reaching the 6 that you need, since between Ichibyoshi, Crescent Moon, this card once you ride over it next turn, and the 2 you soul charge, that'll give you 5 of the 6 that you need in your soul on turn 3. So a very helpful skill. Now if you miss the grade 1 ride and you still manage to ride this card, you of course will not get that soul charge 2. So even missing a single piece of your ride line can very much hurt you in this deck. It won't totally kill your strategy. Again, it just requires a little more work to make up for it. So yeah, try the best you can to hit that ride chain, which again is made easier by their other effects. Speaking of which, we have her second auto ability that says at the beginning of your ride phase, look at 5 cards from the top of your deck. Search for up to 1 card named Goddess of the Full Moon Tsukuyomi from among them. Ride it, put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order, and if you rode, you cannot normal ride during that ride phase. So once again, the same skill pretty much as Crescent Moon and Ichibyoshi, letting you check the top 5 for your grade 3 boss form of Tsukuyomi, Goddess of the Full Moon. So again, helpful in getting that more consistently, hopefully letting you go into your main boss of the deck for free. But again, even if you whiff, you can normal ride from hand if you have a copy of Full Moon in your hand. And once again, it sends 4 to 5 cards to the bottom of your deck, helping you build up that stack even more as well. So once again, definitely a 4 of max copy for this deck. So next up, we got 3 copies of Battle Maiden Tagitsu Hime. So her auto ability says when this unit attacks, if the number of Oracle Think Tank in your soul is 6 or more, this unit gets power plus 3,000 until the end of that battle. So just a 12k beater, again pretty easy condition to meet here. If you get your ride line off, you got 5 of the 6 already. So one way or another, you should be able to get 6 cards in your soul without too much trouble. So it should be a 12k attacker, which means she can poke anything but a cross ride unboosted. With Gemini behind her, she makes a roll of 20, which is magic numbers against 10k Vanguards. So overall, just a nice beat stick for the deck. Next up, we got 3 copies of Oracle Guardian Red Eye. So he has an auto ability. It's active on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle. That says when this unit's attack hits, if you have an Oracle Think Tank Vanguard, you may soul charge 1. So this is another useful way to build up that soul, especially if you miss your ride chain and you need the extra soul charges in order to get to the 6 that you need. This can be a fairly easy way to get it. It isn't on hit skill, but it can hit anything. It doesn't have to hit a Vanguard, so you can just target their rear guards with this if you're more worried about getting the soul, and your opponent will be less likely to block it. So just a helpful way in building up that resource and getting you to the 6 that you need in order to use some of your skills. So then lastly, for the grade 2s, we just have 2 copies of Silent Tom. So he has a continuous ability that is again active on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle. That says during the battle that this unit attacks, if you have an Oracle Think Tank Vanguard, your opponent cannot normal call grade 0 units to Guardian Circle. So a very nice ability, just a pretty cool guard restrict, blocking your opponent from guarding with grade 0s, which is a big deal since obviously shield values are a lot less in vintage formats. All their grade 0s will be their 10k shields, so can make it harder for them to guard. Now, as you can see, Silent Tom is an 8k base, so in order for this card to be really effective, you do really need to get Gemini behind him in order to make a row of 16k, which will still be able to hit magic numbers against a 11k Vanguard. If your opponent is a 10k Vanguard, it's not as bad since you can just like put Crescent Moon behind him or whatever, just any 7k in order to hit 15. But most of the time you're going to be facing 11k Vanguards and you really want to hit that 16. So making a row of him plus Gemini is pretty important, which I am only running 2 copies of this card. I would like to run more, but honestly it was just a space issue. And again, he's more useful late game anyway when your opponent's already at 5 damage. Since if you can make that row of 16k, he's going to force at least 10k worth of shield. And if your opponent has to block that attack, they can't guard with grade 0s, so that's going to use up at least 2 cards from their hand in order for them to block that attack. And of course, if you get any triggers during your drive checks, you can stack that power onto him, forcing potentially more cards out of your opponent's hand as well. So a very cool offensive card, but it is requiring a little bit of setup and mostly helpful late game, so he works fairly nicely as a 2-of. So that is all of the grade 2s. Moving on to the grade 3s. First off, we have our main boss unit of the deck, which is 4 copies of Goddess of the Full Moon, Tsukuyomi. So she has a continuous ability on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle that says if you do not have a card named Goddess of the Half Moon Tsukuyomi, a card named Goddess of the Crescent Moon Tsukuyomi, and a card named Godhawk Ichiboshi in your soul, this unit gets power minus 2,000. So she is an 11k base, but she does lose 2,000 power if you don't have your entire ride chain in your soul. So again, missing even a single piece of it can be very, very dangerous, bringing her down to a 9k base, which is definitely not where you want to be defensive-wise during your opponent's turn. So try your best, as always, to always hit that ride chain. Thankfully, if you do miss some pieces, we do have a way to repair that, sort of, other than just, lucking into a blind soul charge, which involves her second ability, her activate ability, when she's on Vanguard Circle. That has a cost of Counterblast 2. That says if the number of Oracle Think Tank in your soul is 6 or more, you draw 2 cards and choose a card from your hand and put it into your soul. So this is her main ability, and there's a lot to this. So first off, this ability requires you to have 6 or more cards in your soul. However, it doesn't require you to have those 6 in order to activate it. So that's something you need to be mindful of here, since it will give you the option to go ahead and use this ability even if you don't have the 6, which means if you use it and pay the cost, it will do nothing. So don't do that. Be mindful of your soul count here, which again, if you get the entire ride chain, you'll have 5 out of 6, so you still will need to use either Psychic Bird or Red Eye, usually, in order to get that 6th one in there. Alternatively, if you don't have either one of those, you can potentially ride another copy of this card on turn 4, which isn't the ideal way to get to 6, but if you're really desperate, you can go that route as well. But yeah, make sure you have that 6 in your soul before you choose to pay this cost, otherwise you're just wasting counterblasts for nothing. But if you do get the 6 in your soul and you use this skill, it's a counterblast 2 to draw 2, and then you send 1 card from your hand into your soul. So it's a counterblast 2 for a +1, which in vintage format actually isn't too bad. Plus it lets you hand filter a little bit since you're drawing 2 and then losing 1. So if you got some extra copies of this card in your hand, or just some more useless stuff you don't really care about, you can just shove it into the soul. And again, if you did miss a piece of your ride chain, but you have a copy of it in your hand, you can shove that missing piece into your soul to potentially turn off her first continuous ability that would be causing her to lose power. So that is a way to repair that if you get unlucky on your ride chain. Now if you get unlucky on the ride chain, you're also going to have to do a little more work to get to the 6 soul you need in order to use this in the first place. But if you have your red eyes hit a few times or use a few copies of Psychic Bird, you still can pull it off. So overall, just a very nice skill all around. Again, it's more draw power, helping you potentially reach that stack faster as well. This ability also is not once per turn, so if you can pay the cost twice, you can go ahead and use this ability twice in one turn to potentially draw 4 and shove 2 into your soul. So that can build up your soul as well, but we don't really use the soul for much in this deck other than just getting to at least 6 to, turn on some of our abilities. So that isn't as helpful as it potentially could be, but obviously the draws help a lot, and potentially reaching that stack faster is nice as well. And if you look into a heal trigger and you can potentially use this a 3rd time, you can go for that option as well. So overall, just a very, very cool boss for the deck. So next up for the grade 3s, we have 2 copies of CEO Amaterasu. So she has her continuous ability when she's on Vanguard Circle that says during your turn, if the number of cards in your hand is 4 or greater, this unit gets power plus 4,000. So a nice power-up skill, again, easy condition to meet, just had to have 4 cards in your hand. Which, one thing to point out here, unlike Weather Girl Milk's skill, which is a auto on boost, this is a continuous ability, which means that even if you attack with this card and you have like 2 or 3 cards in your hand, if your drive check pushes you up to or past 4, this ability will turn itself on. So potentially you can gain power in the middle of your attack by drive checking into cards and getting your hand count up. So that is a useful ability as well to potentially mess with your opponent. Even if you don't get any triggers, this card can still gain 4k in the middle of an attack. So very helpful skill. So then she has our first auto ability, also when she's on Vanguard Circle, that says at the beginning of your main phase, you soul charge 1, look at the top card of your deck, and put that card on the top or the bottom of your deck. So this card is your backup ride in this deck if you miss your ride chain or you can't get grade 3 Tsukuyomi out. You do want to try to ride into this card. She makes her a very nice backup. At the beginning of your main phase, you get a free soul charge, and you also get a scry, letting you check the top card and either leave it on top or put it on the bottom. So that soul charge again helps you reach your stack faster. If you put the scryed card on the bottom of your deck, it actually adds to your stack. Or of course, if you find a trigger or something good you want to leave on top and check into later, can potentially set up that play as well. So very nice backup Vanguard, just a good 14k beat stick attacker plus boost that lets you build up soul. So again, if you miss your ride chain, have to ride into this, and you still want to go into full moon later, those soul charges can help you build up to that 6 soul that you need for when you do go into her. So can still help you get back on track later if you want to shift into that. So then lastly, she also has her second auto ability that's active on Vanguard or Vanguard Circle. That is her Mega Blast ability, so it has a cost of Soul Blast 8 and Counter Blast 5. So massive cost. But it says when this unit's attack hits, you may pay the cost, and if you do, draw up to 5 cards. So obviously a very powerful ability, letting you draw 5 cards from your deck. It does have to hit, but again, it can hit anything, not a Vanguard specifically. So if you want to attack into their rear guard to try to go for this, you can. Now, obviously, it's extremely resource heavy. You have to have 8 soul. You have to have 5 face-up damage. So this is not something that you really want to go for in this deck. I think I've gotten it off one time. As many times as I've used this deck, I think I've only ever successfully got this off once. So it can be a backup option. It's not something you want to really focus on. If you do get it, obviously draw 5 is a huge advantage. It gets you a massive hand. However, it's a late game on hit skill, so that can make it difficult to use. Obviously, it takes a ton of resources. It works on Rearguard Circle, but if you have Full Moon as your Vanguard, you've probably already used her skill and used up some of your counterblasts, so you won't have the 5 face-up damage in order to use this. And of course, if you Soul Blast 8, you're probably Soul Blasting out to the rest of your ride chain, which is going to knock Full Moon down to 9k base anyway. So it can work on Rearguard, but it might end up hurting you more than it helps. And it's overall just a pain to use in general. So usually if I fail to get my ride chain off in this deck, I try to ride into this card and just kind of sit on her and use her first 2 abilities to my advantage in order to build soul, gain power, and, you know, potentially set up triggers on the top of my deck. And then maybe potentially still go into Full Moon later if I have the right setup to fix my soul and gain the draw power off of that. But yeah, most of the time I end up not really worrying about this skill and not really going for it. But it can't always be there, and the off chance that you get it off, it is always a pretty cool moment. So then lastly for the grade 3s, we just have one copy of Evil Eye Princess Euriley. So she has an auto ability that says when this unit is placed on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle, if the number of Oracle Think Tank in your soul is 6 or more, you choose a card at random from your opponent's hand, bind it face down, and at the beginning of the end phase of that turn, your opponent puts that card into his or her hand. So this is a pretty cool ability. This card is not mandatory by any means. I'm kind of just using it because I think it's cool, and Misaki used it in the anime. So yeah, I snuck in one copy just for that reason. It works on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle, but you really don't want to ride this card, because if you ride it, you can potentially use this skill once, but it requires the 6 soul, which if you didn't ride into Amaterasu or Full Moon, you probably don't have the 6 soul to even use it in the first place. Plus, even if you do get it off once you use this ability, it's just vanilla on your Vanguard Circle after that. So try not to ride this card if you can help it. Works much better on Rearguard Circle after you've done your Tsukuyomi play and got your soul set up and everything. And it lets you just temporarily bind to one card out of your opponent's hand. So it's a temporary -1 to them. They do get the card back at the end of that turn. But with the right timing, it can be a very deadly skill if your opponent has just enough in their hand to be able to block your attacks. This can push you over the edge, knocking out some shield from their hand, especially if you combine it with Silent Tom. If you get rid of one of their, 5k shields from their hands, Silent Tom blocking the grade 0s, they might not be able to block his attack without that extra card. So, can be a very helpful skill. You're binding the card at random from their hand, so you don't know what you're going to get. But if you get lucky and bind a perfect guard or something, you can definitely screw over your opponent that way. So yeah, there's a little bit of luck factor on this card, and as far as how helpful it is, being just the temporary -1. However, it is free. It doesn't have any sort of cost tied to this ability, just the condition of having the 6 soul. So calling this and just temporarily plucking one out of your opponent's hand to try to finish them off on that turn can still be a cool play. But yeah, overall, just a card that I'm running mostly because I feel like it, and definitely not something that's mandatory for the deck. So if you want to replace this with another copy of Amaterasu or another copy of Silent Tom or whatever else, you can choose to go that route as well. So that is the deck, so we will go ahead and have our one fight with it. And I think we'll fight Kana this time. And we'll be going second. And we got 2/3 of our ride chain, our opening hand, so that's pretty good. And I'm gonna keep this hand actually. And there's the last piece, alright. So since it's the start of our ride phase, we can use Ichibiyoshi's skill. And we will check the top 5, and we did not find Goddess of the Crescent Moon, which is fine because we have her in our hand anyway. But we can send all 5 of these cards to the bottom of the deck. So this goes in order from bottom to top. So we are going to put Half Moon at the bottom, and then we'll do Silent Tom. Actually, no, we'll do Gemini, then the draw, then Silent Tom, and the draw. So if we check the first draw, we'll get Tom into our hand, then check the second draw, get Gemini, and then have Half Moon on the bottom. So now we can ride from our hand normally, so we'll go ahead and ride Goddess of the Crescent Moon, Tsukuyomi. So, let's see, we'll go ahead and plop Milk behind the Vanguard, because why not? And then we can just attack. And Milk skill will give us the extra 4k, since we do have 4 cards in our hand. And we get a heal trigger that is wasted, unfortunately, since we have nothing to heal. And I'll let that one through. Alright, so now we can use Crescent Moon Tsukuyomi's skill to again check the top 5, and once again we did not find Half Moon, unfortunately. So we sent all 5 of these to the bottom. So let's see, we'll put Amaterasu, and then Gemini, Tagitsu Hime, then the crit and the heal. So that gives us 10 cards stacked at the bottom of our deck. And fortunately, once again, we do have Half Moon in our hand, so we'll go ahead and normal ride Goddess of the Half Moon Tsukuyomi. And we can use her skill, since we have Crescent Moon and Ichibiyoshi in our soul, to let us soul charge 2. And we soul charge another Half Moon. So we'll go ahead and call Oracle Guardian Red Eye over here. And I think that's all for now. So we'll go ahead and attack with a Vanguard first. And once again, Milk skill will still give us the 4k, since we do have 4 cards in our hand. And we get a draw trigger, and we draw a heal, of course. So we'll give that power to Red Eye. So now I have Red Eye attack. And she guards. She used Feluca's skill to soul charge. But that is all the board she could build. So we'll let this through since they're only attack this turn. She gets a draw trigger as well. The power is wasted. It gets her another card in her hand. And there goes Full Moon. Alright, so once again we'll use Goddess of the Half Moon's ability. And check the top 5. And we did find Goddess of the Full Moon. So that means we can Superior Ride. And now send the other 4 to the bottom. So let's see, we'll send Tsukuyomi and the Perfect Guard, unfortunately. Then the crit, then the heal. Which means we now have 14 cards stacked at the bottom of our deck. And it's still the ride phase, but we can't normal ride anymore, so we're going to just end the phase. So we have 5 cards in our soul, so we're 1 short. So since Red Eye's attack did not hit last turn, what we're going to do is we're just going to call Psychic Bird. And we'll go ahead and use his Activate ability. Shove it into the soul and draw a card. And we drew another Psychic Bird. Alright then. So now we have the 6 soul that we need, so we can use Goddess of the Full Moon's Activate ability. So we'll Counter Blast 2. And we draw 2. And we had to shove 1 from our hand into our soul. So we'll put that other copy of Full Moon. And we have a handful of triggers, so we can't really build much of a board. So in that case, we're just going to go ahead and attack. And we have 8 cards in our hand now, so we definitely gained the boost from Milk. Pushing Tsukuyomi to 21k, which is a magic number. And we get 2 more Tsukuyomis. And she gets a crit trigger, which means Red Eye will definitely not be able to hit anything. Not that he could before, but either way, we're going to have to just end our turn there. And she rode into Pacifica. She let her soul charge and draw and send 1 to the bottom. Well, fortunately, she still can't build much of a board either. So we're going to let this one through. And without a booster, she cannot hit our Vanguard, so she's going to swing at Red Eye. And I do not want to lose that rear guard right now, so I'm going to guard that with a draw. Alright, so now we'll end the phase without riding. And we only have 1 face-up damage, so we cannot use our Vanguard skill again. But we can build a bit of a board here, so we'll go ahead and call Goddess of the Half Moon. Just have another attacker. And then we'll put Gemini behind her. And we'll put Goddess of the Crescent Moon behind Red Eye. And we go ahead and attack with a Vanguard first. And once again, Milk will give us an extra 4K. And we again got no triggers off of that. Alright, so now we will attack with Red Eye. And she guards. So then we can attack with our rear guard Tsukuyomi. She lets down through. And she gets a crit trigger that is wasted, since that was our last attack. So we got her to 5, but she does still have 8 cards in her hand now. Pacifica again lets her soul charge draw and bottom deck 1 from her hand. And she has something resembling a board now. So we're going to guard this one with a heal. And I'm gonna go ahead and let this one through. She doesn't have enough soul to do her Mega Blast. And no triggers, nice. And we get a draw trigger, which her last rear guard is just 10k, so it already can't hit our Vanguard, so I'm gonna give that to Red Eye, actually. And we drew another Red Eye anyway. And I'll just let that one through. Some vanilla rear guard anyway. And we drew our last Red Eye. Alright, so again in the phase without writing. And we have enough face-up damage now, so we once again use Goddess of the Full Moon's activate ability to counter blast 2. And we draw 2 and put 1 into our soul. So we'll shove that Full Moon. And then we'll go ahead and plop another Red Eye down. And I think we are good to go. So we will attack with the Vanguard first. And once again, we gain 4k from Milk, since we have a whopping 10 cards in our hand. Perfect guards. She has to guard everything now because she's at 5. Alright, so we'll attack with our left Red Eye. And then with our right Red Eye. And now she does have the resources for a Mega Blast, which would want to block our Vanguard attack at this point anyway. So, let's see, we'll guard that one with one of these crits. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and perfect guard that one. And we'll discard Milk. And I think I'm going to guard with Tsukuyomi, and then we'll intercept with one of these red eyes. Alright, so once again, in the phase with our ready. And we have 2 cards left in our deck that are not part of our stack, so after we do our Twin Drive this turn, we will be at the stack. However, what I could do, since I have 2 copies of Psychic Bird in my hand, we could go ahead and reach it now, which I actually think I'm going to do. So we're going to call Psychic Bird and use its activate ability. So we'll shove it into our soul and draw. We'll get your Riley, nice. So then we'll call our other Psychic Bird, and we'll use its ability as well. And draw one more time. And we get Silent Tom. So now we got the 14 cards left in our deck, which we know exactly what they are since we have reached our stack. So that means this upcoming Twin Drive should be 2 draw triggers in a row. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and call Silent Tom over here. And I think that's all for now, so we're going to go ahead and attack with the Vanguard first. And gain our 4K from Milk. She perfect guards again. And we get our draw trigger, and we will draw our other copy of Silent Tom. And we're going to give that power to Silent Tom as well. And we get our second draw trigger, which will let us draw our Gemini, which we did. And we'll give that to Silent Tom as well, which means we might have her here. So we're going to go ahead and attack with Red Eye. And she had a guard and intercept there with some of her 5Ks. So yeah, we definitely should have her here, unless she perfect guards again. So we're going to attack with Silent Tom, boosted by Gemini for a whopping 26,000 with guard restrict. And she's got to let it through. And we got her with that one. So there you go, that was my Tsukuyomi deck. I do really like this deck. Like I said, it is one of my favorites in vintage format. This is a deck that I wanted to build in real life years ago, back when this was the current format, but unfortunately I never got a chance to then. So I am really glad that I finally got to play this deck in some fashion. So anyway, I'll be back soon with more deck profiles. Next up, I think I'll be doing another vintage deck with my Nova Grappler Blah deck. So until then, I guess that's all for this video. So lots of luck to you and yours.